I didn't even realize right away that he had started his speech. Because only one phrase was running through my head. Not today. Not today. My name is Jennifer. I'm 55 years old. I work as a financial specialist at a private pension fund. And to be honest, for the last 28 years, I've lived with the belief that stability is the highest form of love, not romance, not wild gestures or dramatic declarations, just stability. I built our life so we would always have a tomorrow, so our kids would have a chance, so we'd have a roof over our heads, the bills paid, the fridge full. I was the one who kept everything in balance. But now I'm standing in the soft light of the hall, next to my husband, and I realize the balance was broken long ago. I just didn't want to see it. I'm not an actress, but I had to play a part. Ever since the day I found his email, then the bank statements he accidentally left in the printer, I became the wife who noticed nothing. But inside I was falling apart. Sometimes I'd just sit in my car, parked outside the office, unable to move, just sitting, just breathing. Once I even locked myself in the office bathroom and cried on the floor. I'm ashamed. I've never been that woman. I was always together, always strong, but something in me had broken. Michael stood with a glass in his hand. The light from the spotlights carved sharp shadows around him, and I saw the corner of his mouth twitch, nervously, always so confident. He suddenly looked awkward, and when he finally spoke, I already knew what he was going to say, because this was our last act. I want to say a few words, not only about our beautiful daughter, but also about the changes that await us all. Something shifted. The room reacted. Smiles, whispers, curiosity. And me? My palms turned to ice. Even though I knew what was coming, hearing it here, in public, in front of Lily, our friends, and their gossip-hungry parents, it hit like a punch to the gut. I have made a difficult decision. Jennifer and I are breaking up, and I hope we can remain friends. Something twisted inside me. I wanted to scream. He was supposed to do it afterwards. At home. Face to face. Not like this. Not in front of everyone, but I said nothing. I just stood there. Smiling. Like a robot. Though I'm sure my eyes gave me away. What he didn't know, what he still doesn't know, is that I found out everything. I saw the photos. I read the messages. I contacted a lawyer. And I remembered the prenup he made me sign years ago, thinking he was protecting himself. Back then, I was too in love to argue, but too smart. Not to make just a few small changes. I didn't want to cry anymore. I wasn't broken anymore. I was still, cold, focused. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. That evening, he stepped into his new life, never realizing that I'd already begun to destroy his old one. And it didn't start with a lie. It started the moment I realized I was living with the ghost of a man I once loved. It started with little things. He began coming home late, smelling of someone else's perfume, roses. Michael never wore floral scents. Then came the coffee to bed, the flowers, for no reason. It wasn't romantic. It was guilt. I knew his password. I checked his email, not out of jealousy, but to prove to myself that it was all just in my head. But then I saw the messages. Booked a room. Send me another 5,000. Meet me at the parking lot. No emotion, no flirtation, purely functional, like a financial report. I closed the laptop, walked to the kitchen, picked up the knife, and started chopping vegetables. My hands were shaking, but I didn't break. I didn't crumble. The contract was already turning in my head, the one we renewed last year. Michael wanted to protect himself. I agreed. Of course I did, but I changed one clause. If he cheated on me, everything stayed with me. He signed it. Without reading, Irony? I kept quiet. For months. I watched. I smiled. I worked. I made our daughter a dress for her prom, and while I stitched the sequins, I was stitching the net, preparing the ground. One day, I found her Instagram, younger, slim, photos with a glass of wine, captions about her inner goddess. I didn't know her name, but I knew it was her. And yes, I'm angry. But I am not broken. I am collected, cold, caring, where it counts, carving, where it hurts. I didn't need her name. I knew enough to rip it all down. Everything they built in the shadows, I could burn with a match. And then, he made a mistake. A big one. And as always, he thought I wouldn't notice. He thought I wouldn't notice when $27,000 disappeared from our joint account. Michael always called me the home accountant. He used to joke that we weren't married, just a corporation with an emotional superstructure. I did manage everything, taxes, bills, even the automatic utility payments. I was aware of every transaction, so when I saw 3 transfers labeled consulting, PR services, and branding, I didn't even blink. I just felt something click. I opened the financial tracker, typed in the dates, tracked the routes. The services were going to a small marketing agency. I checked their website. Guess who was the project manager? Her? Jade, the same Jade from Instagram. Now I knew her name. Jade West, 43 years old, former beauty salon manager, then wellness brand, divorced, and apparently now the proud co-founder of a fake startup with my husband. He probably thought it was brilliant. A joint project, a business, something to make it all look legitimate. But he forgot who he was married to. I gathered everything: electronic statements, screenshots, the contract, my own notes. I created a separate folder on Google Drive. I named it simply Q4. Professional defamation. I think in quarters, but this time, instead of profit, I was planning destruction. I still didn't know how I wanted to present it. Abruptly? Through a lawyer? In person? Over coffee, maybe? Didn't matter. I had time. And Michael? Michael was starting to slip. Just a little. But enough. He forgot to delete a letter. Left his watch in the bathroom, with a woman's hair caught in the strap. He was late for dinner, even though he suggested it. I said nothing. But my silence? It was becoming louder. At the same time, I watched Lily. She didn't know, but she sensed it. Kids always do. When I was making breakfast, she asked, "Mom, are you sure everything's okay with Dad?" I smiled and said, "Everything will be fine." It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the truth, yet. I didn't know the when, but I knew the impact was coming. And this time, he would be the one who had to lie. Everything changed the day I found an unsigned letter in my mailbox. It was in a white envelope. No stamp. No signature. Just lying there. Among the bills. As if someone had simply dropped it there in the night. When I unfolded the paper, my hand trembled. Not on purpose. Just instinct. "He promises me he'll leave you, but it seems you're holding him back. Don't worry, he'll be free soon. We all will be." No name. No greeting. Just those words. Printed. I sat on the edge of the bed, letter in hand, and something tightened in my chest. But it wasn't fear. It was rage. Now I knew. She knew everything. About me. About the facade. And most importantly, she thought she was winning. Something shifted inside me. A gear, a lock, a fuse. This wasn't betrayal anymore. This was war. She wrote to me because she thought she'd won. Because he had probably promised her everything. And promises? That was Michael's trademark. But he forgot one thing. I don't play chess. I play finance. And finance is much more precise, much tougher, and much more deadly. I opened my Google Drive, the same folder, Q4. I scanned the letter, uploaded it, then wrote to my lawyer, subject line, time. 2 hours later, we had a consultation. We laid it all out, the contract, the assets, the real estate, every decimal, every clause. My lawyer, Joanne, is a woman who could stare down a freight train. She said, "You're in the perfect position. You won't just keep what you have, you'll take control." But there was one detail. Michael didn't know I had a lawyer. More importantly, he didn't know that the contract allowed for his financial collapse if infidelity was proven. And for that, screenshots weren't enough. I needed more, something irrevocable, something he couldn't weasel out of, a confession. I knew what I had to do. I had to let him believe that I was still the same naive, quiet Jennifer, the one who avoided conflict, who was afraid of the truth. So I started making dinner. I called him at work. "Remember how we used to make lasagna together? Let's do it again. Can you come home early tonight?" He said, "Yes." Lily was spending the night at a friend's. We were alone, candles, wine, nostalgia. It looked like a scene from a bad movie. But I knew exactly what I was doing. I hid the voice recorder in the napkin drawer, turned it on while I grated the cheese, and I waited for him to say something. That would destroy him. I couldn't force the truth out of him, but I could build the room for it. I could make it feel safe. And I almost succeeded. Almost. He took a sip of wine, looked at me, and said, "I'm happy. Finally. And it's not you." Then, he touched my hand. And I knew it was time to play my hand. This was the moment when everything should have fallen apart. But instead, he cracked. He sat across from me, a glass in his hand, and for the first time in months, there was something in his eyes, something close to honesty. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was his delusion that I still knew nothing. And then he said it. "I'm happy, Jen. Finally. And she's not you. She doesn't analyze. She doesn't control. She just accepts me for who I am." I smiled. Barely. Like in one of those movies, where the heroine knows something he doesn't. The voice recorder was running, quietly, tucked away in the drawer between the napkins. After that sentence, I didn't need to ask anything else, but I wanted more. "And how long have you been?" I asked it softly, almost a whisper. He looked down. "Over a year." My heart beat once, twice, but my voice stayed steady, my breathing steady, my posture steady. Did she know about me? I didn't ask for an answer. I asked to deliver the final blow. "Not at first," he said, but I told her I was sick of lying. We're planning something. I don't know what, but it's definitely not what we had. I looked at him, and a completely different movie started playing in my head. Him signing the contract, him transferring the money, leaving me, but thinking it would be clean, beautiful, without consequences. I stood up, went to the kitchen cabinet, took out a folder, and placed it, firmly, in front of him. "Do you remember this document?" I asked. "You signed it." He leaned forward, read the first line. "Additional conditions for the division of property upon divorce." I sat down, not as his wife, but as a woman, finally, reclaiming her voice. "The property, the accounts, the house, everything will remain mine, everything I've built. You signed it because you thought you were in control, and I signed it because I knew this day would come." His face froze, then shifted. Confusion, anger, and finally, fear. "Did you write that down?" he asked, but the confidence was gone. "Does it matter?" I replied. And for the first time in a very long time, He looked down and said, "Nothing." The silence wasn't cold. It was electric, like the moment right before a storm. But there wouldn't be a storm. Not this time. Because I wouldn't let her ruin my life anymore. This time, she'll ruin his. The next morning, he didn't show up for work, and that's when she texted me, directly, no emotion, no apology, just a message, and it was a warning. The message was short. "I know what you did. We need to talk, soon." It appeared on my screen on Sunday. 7:13 a.m. I was brewing coffee. My phone lit up dimly. Jade. Not a fake account, not a letter, just straight to me. And the tone was disturbing. No rage, no pleading, just cold, like a business transaction. I didn't respond. Not right away. Instead, I called Joanne. Everything was going according to plan. The documents were ready, complete. Monday, that was the day. The official notice to Michael. Accounts frozen. Employer notified. Family status changed. But something inside me was shifting, that same heaviness, like before a storm. Michael was gone. His phone, off. Lily had texted him, more than once. No response. She didn't know, but she was starting to guess. "Why didn't Dad come home?" I told her. "He's traveling." And just like that, for the first time in this entire war, I lied to my daughter. But what truly disturbed me was the second message. "I know about the contract. If you think he'll leave me with nothing, you don't know what I'm capable of." I reread it. Once, twice, a third time. And felt it, that creeping cold, not fear. Something deeper, premonition. She knew about the money, about the agreement. And if she knew that, what else did she have access to? Business? Accounts? Passwords? Had Michael already transferred something to her? I drove to the bank, checked every line, every transfer, every access point. So far, I was still in control. But I no longer felt safe, because I understood. Jade wasn't just a lover, she was a predator. When I got home, I locked the door, sat down, opened my laptop. I went to her profile. There was a new photo, a glass of wine, a man's shadow in the background, not Michael. Caption: "Some men can't handle strong women. Good thing not all of them are like that." It was war, and she knew. I had accepted the challenge. I thought I was in control. But now, I would have to prove it. Not with words, with actions. And then, that night, his boss called me. I spent years preparing Lily for real life. We talked about choices, morals, boundaries, but I never prepared her for betrayal, for the fact that the man who taught her to ride a bike could disappear without even saying goodbye. When Michael's boss called and said he'd taken temporary leave, without explanation, I knew. He'd run, or was hiding. And worst of all, he was hiding from me, from the consequences. But I didn't want Lily to find out from whispers, from stares, from someone else's version. She deserved the truth, even if she wasn't ready, even if I wasn't. We sat in our tiny kitchen. I made her chamomile tea, the kind I used to make when she had a fever. But this time, she needed medicine for her heart. "Mom, what's going on?" she asked. Blunt, direct, like always. I took her hand. "Lily, your father's been having an affair. It's been going on for a long time." She didn't say anything, just let her eyes fill, but she didn't cry. She held on. My little girl, not so little anymore. "Is it Jade?" She said it so quietly. It almost didn't reach me. I flinched. "How do you know?" "I saw her, 2 months ago, in the parking lot, at Dad's work. They were hugging." Back then, she thought it was a misunderstanding. So did I. The air felt thick, like we were both underwater. She knew, and kept quiet. Just like me. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "Because I wanted to protect you. But instead, I made it even more painful. I'm so sorry, Lily." We sat in silence, for the first time, not as mother and daughter, but as women, as allies. "What now?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "Now, we're honest. I'm filing for divorce, and you and I, we won't lose anything we've built. He left us, but we won't leave each other." She nodded, and again, silence. But this time, it wasn't hollow. It was filled with dignity. Then, a new message. "Jade, tell your daughter the truth about yourself, and that your purity is a fiction." I felt the blood rush to my temples. She was going after Lily, trying to expand the battlefield, trying to divide. I walked over to the window. Outside, somewhere beyond the skyline, a woman who thought she had already won was hiding. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I hadn't even started yet. I thought I was protecting my daughter, but now, I would have to protect myself, from her. Because Jade knew something about me, and she was ready to use it. I built my life on precision, discipline, and silence. But the past? It always finds a crack to seep through. After Jade's message, I didn't sleep, not a second. I just sat in my office, laptop glowing in the dark, a ghost light, and in front of me, not files, not spreadsheets, but a box, a real box, paper letters, old ones I hadn't opened in years. There it was, a letter from the state prosecutor's office, 2002. It was about an internal leak, financial data, from a company where I worked as a junior analyst. I wasn't to blame, but I knew who was, and I stayed silent. For that silence, they gave me a second chance. I left by mutual agreement, signed a non-disclosure agreement. That's how corporate finance works. Bury the damage, preserve the brand. But to outsiders, it could look dirty, compromising, even criminal. Only 3 people knew. One of them, my former boss, the same one who later worked with Michael. Now I understood. Jade didn't guess. She knew. She had proof. And she thought it would break me, force me to explain it to Lily, to become just like them. But I wasn't like them. Not perfect, but real. I grabbed my keys, left the house, and drove straight to Lily's campus. No text, no call. I just showed up. She came out looking stunned, eyes wide, scared, but still came. "I need to talk to you," I said. "But this time, I'll tell you everything." We sat on a bench, by the fountain, wind in the leaves, a quiet place for heavy things, and I told her, all of it, the job, the leak, the silence, the non-disclosure, the fear, the cost, the feeling of almost losing us. She didn't interrupt, didn't flinch. She just listened, like a woman. "Do you think this makes me like them?" I asked. She looked at me, clear-eyed. "No, Mom, it makes you alive, and finally, honest." I couldn't hold back. I hugged her, tight. I cried like a child, not out of weakness, but because I could. We weren't mother and daughter anymore. We were a union. The next day, an official notice. Jade's lawyer, demanding financial compensation for loss of investment in Michael. Not heartbreak, not romance, property. Michael had become currency. And in that moment, I decided this game would not end in court. I lived with him for 28 years, but only now do I truly understand he is not a man, he is an asset, and I am his biggest risk. The letter from Jade's lawyer came in cold. No emotion, just numbers, articles, claims. She demanded money, for time, for love, for illusions, for so-called partnership plans. She claimed she'd invested in Michael, and I had ruined it. I didn't respond. I took action. The next morning, I found the address. Her office, new, still under construction. No sign yet, just a glass door. A receptionist with a smile so fake it could crack. And her, Jade, in a beige jacket, phone in hand. When she saw me, she glanced at the security guard, but didn't call him. She thought she was in control. "This isn't a courtroom, Jennifer," she said. "There are different rules here." I didn't reply. I placed 2 documents on the table. The first, our marriage contract, with a specific clause, all joint assets transferred to me upon proven infidelity. Signed, notarized, legally binding. The second, a flash drive. "What's that?" she asked, brushing it off. Dismissive. I met her eyes. "The voice of your asset," I said. It was Michael, on tape, confessing, detailing the affair, naming her, saying the words she wanted to hear, the same words that now condemned her. "If you come near me, Lily, or my property again, I will file a counterclaim. For blackmail, for trespassing, and I will win. Because I don't play games. I count." She didn't smile anymore. Her eyes, dead, flat, colorless. "You think you won?" she hissed. "I didn't even start," I replied. I left the flash drive and a copy of the contract, right there, and walked out, without looking back. I thought it was over. But when I got home, Michael was sitting in the kitchen. Alone, waiting. And what he told me wasn't an apology. It was something much worse. Some people ask for forgiveness to be forgiven. Others, to relieve themselves of a burden. He came to ask for forgiveness, but not mine. I found him in the kitchen, sitting at the table, holding a cup he'd never have chosen himself. It was my cup, cracked, old, but beloved. "Are you alone?" he asked. "I've always been alone." We sat in silence, a moment that didn't need words, but he spoke anyway. "She's not who I thought she was, but you're not who I thought you'd become either. Because I became someone better than you could have imagined," I said, not with anger, with truth. He nodded, slowly, weakly. "I have nothing left," he whispered. "She left me. She said I was weak, that I didn't deliver what I promised." I sat across from him. "What do you want?" "I don't know. Not forgiveness. Just to be somewhere quiet." Michael always ran from silence. TV, music, noise. He drowned in it, and now he was asking for it. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see betrayal or fear, just a person, small, lost. But it didn't matter anymore. "We're getting divorced. Legally, it's final. But don't worry, you'll get what the contract allows. Nothing more, nothing less." He nodded, didn't argue. For the first time, nothing to say. When he left, I washed the cup, slowly, like a ritual, and suddenly I realized I hadn't destroyed him. I had simply stopped trying to save him. 2 weeks later, I opened a new bank account, in my name. It held the money I'd saved over the years, and a little extra, from selling my share of the business. I wasn't left with nothing. I was left with myself. I rented a small house, by the ocean. I worked remotely. I wrote. I read. And one day, Lily came to visit. We sat on the terrace, silent, drinking tea. The silence didn't frighten me anymore. It was complete. She looked at me and asked, "Are you happy?" "No." I paused. "But I'm free." And that was the first time I ever said it out loud. Sometimes financial crises aren't about money. They're in your heart. But if you've been through devaluation, you learn how to count. And most importantly, you learn who not to let into the balance of your life.